Hey everyone, it's a pleasure to be here. We're okay to sit here, or should we go up, or we're okay?
You can wander around.
I'll stand up actually, because I can't see everyone. Hopefully that's not going to mess with your cameras. I know we have to get these things right. I was going to make a very loose link between Tupperware and the Queen, but I won't do that, because you've heard about that story, right? The Queen's a big fan of Tupperware, and maybe there's something linked to her embracing online technologies. But anyway, let's leave that be. I'm going to keep this relatively short, so we can get into a conversation about all of this. But I just want to reflect on sort of what you've just said there, Diana, because I mean, you're spot on in a lot of what you said, but I just want to add a bit from our own perspective, and also just test some of the premises that we're acting on and that we're working from. The obvious thing to say at the start is that the reason for this actually is all of the things that Diana mentioned, but it's more. I mean, there are so many factors in this. Yes, there are all the things that's already been mentioned by Neil. The fact that, you know, we used to buy our DVDs at Blockbuster and now we rent at LoveFilm and Netflix. Their market was taken overnight. Borders filed for bankruptcy because of Amazon overnight. These things are now beginning to come into education. Now, point number one is there is far too much hyperbole in this space about what will happen, in my opinion, right? And that might be surprising to hear, but actually there is some nonsense sometimes about all of us selling our campuses and turning them into out-of-town shopping centres because we're all going online. Nonsense. People will still want the face-to-face experience. People still want live music, but our business models are changing, our ways of delivery are changing, our students' expectations are changing, and crucially, Britain's ambition in this market, in this environment, in this sector, has to also take on a new realm. And the reason for that is that we've got the second best higher education system on the planet, a £13 billion export earner for us every single year, certainly not money guilt on that front. And we have to ensure that that is visible, that is accessible, that is open to people right across the planet. Now, all of us know the challenges with visas and Theresa May. All of us know the challenges with the cost of coming to Britain. All of us know about the increasing demand. And so what happens to demand and supply in this environment is going to change radically. Right? We cannot meet the demand, the billions that Diana talked about, the hundreds of millions. We can't meet that demand through conventional supply alone. We can't build enough brick and mortar universities to meet that demand. And therefore we have to shift from bricks and mortar to clicks and mortar. And in order to meet the demand in the fastest growing markets, in the ASEAN markets, in Southeast Asia, in Sao Paulo and Shanghai and Rio and elsewhere, where they want British universities still, like they want our football and our music and all the other brilliant exports we have to the world, we have to look at the online world. So a few thoughts on how this will shift and how it will transform in the coming years based on some of what we've seen and some of what we're doing. So first of all, student recruitment and marketing and our ways of engaging with students. This is already changing radically, and of course MOOCs are one part of that, you're right. You all know about FutureLearn and the sort of commitment that we made and what we did in 2012, and I'll leave Simon to talk about how that's going, but it's brilliant and we're incredibly proud of it. The second example I want to give you is actually something which is quite unique to the OU, which is our BBC relationship. Right? We co-produce 25 programmes with the Beeb every year now, Frozen Planet Coast, Earth, Bangers of Theory, the Money Programme, Inside the Commons recently, which got us a bit of flack. But there is a really important reason for that. Right? So we used to ask everyone to get home from 1 in the morning and turn on the telly after they got home from the pub at 2 o'clock on a Friday morning and turn on the telly some odd-looking professor talking about astrophysics. Right? We don't do that anymore. We have trained more inebriated physicists than anyone else on the planet, and we're very proud of it. But we've changed that relationship. And what happens now is that you have 1 billion people on the planet every year watching and listening to our content through BBC Worldwide, right? Frozen Planet and all those programs. But crucially, here is the business model, and here is the journey that I think we can all learn from. Take Frozen Planet. How many people watched Frozen Planet here in the last year or two? Brilliant. So about 47%. Fantastic. So 47% of the viewing public in the UK actually watched one episode of the Frozen Planet, which is very representative of this room. And we then, at the end of that programme, Attenborough said, go online for further study. Here's what happened. 300,000 people ordered the poster, still up in schools across the country. Tens of thousands downloaded the OU interactives and ebooks and engaged with learning in meaningful ways. But then crucially, and here's the really important bit, hundreds of people signed up for the Frozen Planet course, accredited fee-paying course. If you want to come and learn about penguins, learn with Frozen Planet. And that was our fastest selling course at the Open University ever. Right? Remarkable. That journey from free to fee, from informal to formal, how you take people from Wednesday night, BBC Two, 8 o'clock, sitting in their living room with their kids, to starting a meaningful journey studying for real credit at a real price. That journey is beginning to shift. Now, I can hear what you're probably all saying. Rajay, I don't have a relationship with the BBC. I don't have access into millions of homes every week. But there are other alternatives, and there are very strong alternatives. In fact, sometimes better alternatives. iTunes, right? People don't talk about iTunes in the educational context enough, I don't think. 1,000 universities on the planet on iTunes U. Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Oxford, Cambridge, a whole range of others. Right? It's been going for, I think, 4 or 5 years now. And remarkable thing about iTunes is that we, in the last 3 years, have just gone through 75 million downloads on iTunes. We're the most downloaded university on the planet on iTunes. Now, what's important about that is not the big number, but actually what it tells us. Because it tells us that the old brands don't matter quite so much as they do today because of the world of the internet. It democratizes access for every single brand, right? I have nothing up against Harvard and Yale and Stanford in these domains, right? I have nothing as the Open University. But what we do have is students rating our stuff as high quality, tweeting about it, sharing it, and that's the stuff that then makes it to the front of the homepage. And that democratizes access for all of us as providers, as suppliers, as universities, to have an equitable shot in the online space. And it's going to shake up the way we think about student quality, the way we think about the experience, and the way we think about what matters in terms of brand in the online space. Another final example I'd give you is YouTube, right? People are surprised when I mention YouTube in this context. YouTube is now the second biggest search engine on the planet after Google, right? Handily for Google, they own YouTube too. But it's remarkable, right? And I don't know what people do on YouTube. Maybe they watch Coventry's greatest hits from back in 1987, or they watch, I don't know, skateboarding cats or whatever they do. But the remarkable thing is that you have, universities from around the world. Now, we've recently become the most downloaded university in Europe on YouTube. And what we see there is people changing their perceptions of the OU, right? So we have 60-second short videos of the history of English narrated by Clive Anderson, for instance, right? And then people clicking through on the right-hand side to look at further study, to look at what it's like to do an OU degree. Now, that is relatively inexpensive for us to do, but it has massive reach in terms of students coming through. And crucially for us, right, it's not Kipper ties and late night BBC Two, it's kids saying stuff like the Open University is cool, right? People didn't say that, right? But now they do on platforms and environments and communities like that. So what does all of this mean for face-to-face pedagogy? What does it mean for what happens next? Well, the model around this, I think, again, looking at the pressure on our universities today, I think is going to shift pretty significantly. If you think about the fact that the main magic of a university experience is that time with your tutor, right? It's that time with that brilliant mind at the front of the room. How do you engage those minds more? How do you enable our students to have greater access to those minds? And I saw this recently in a lecture theatre in the US, but it was a brilliant model, and I think it's a sign of the future. But essentially, the university said that the thing that costs me a lot of time is A, my capital, my building, and B, my academic at the front. So why on earth am I doing sort of this part of it? I think what you're doing is quite interesting in this space, Neil, with your business, actually. But this bit of this experience, you could almost do online, right? We could have watched this last night. And, you could watch it on the tube or whatever. And that's what they do. So people watch their lectures in advance, right? That's stuff where they're simply receiving, they do it in advance. But when everyone comes into the lecture theatre, they have a clicker. And if everyone's at 100% in terms of their understanding of that particular part of the module, that particular topic, the lecturer then moved on. If everyone was at 70% or 60%, the laptop lids came down, people turned off their iPads, people leaned in, and they had a conversation about that particular area of the topic, that particular area of the module. Now that is the way that our students want to learn. That is the way that our students want to engage. And that is what enables our tutors and our academics and our professors to get closer to their students in ways that they want to. And I think that's a big part of the future. Just a couple of other examples. We all used to talk about desktop and the internet. Actually, we have to be talking about mobile and tablet. And I'll leave Simon to talk about our focus on mobile and tablet from day one of FutureLearn, which I think has certainly paid off. But just one final other example on this is something we've just launched, actually, called OU Anywhere. OU Anywhere was mind-boggling when I first sort of started to have the conversations about it internally. But we launched it last year. It is basically an app on iOS and Android. And our students around the world download it. And they get all of their teaching materials, all of their lecture notes, all of their videos, all of their assessment, everything on one app, in one place. My really cheesy line is that we became the first university on the planet where you've got a university in your pocket. But you've got everything, and you can essentially study a whole degree on your mobile or your tablet. Now that sort of thing is, I think, again, it's kind of the OU's job, but a sign of, I think, where we're headed and the opportunities that exist in this space. Now there's also the question, and we get it quite often, students around the world, all of these hundreds of millions and billions of people, they don't have access to the kit that you've got in front of you, right? What my boss, what Martin Bean used to call these weapons of mass distraction, right? That you're all tweeting and typing and touching right now, right? These things aren't ubiquitous. They don't exist in every country on the planet. So what do you do about that? Let me give you a few examples. Over the last few years, HEAT, Health Education in Africa, has now trained hundreds of thousands of community health workers in Africa. TESS India is now training 1 million teachers in India. We've got Arun Jaitley, the finance minister, in London today. And part of the conversation we've been having with him and his team is, how do we take this up to 1, 2, 3 million teachers in India? And we're doing it at great success. We've trained 3 million people in Bangladesh over the last few years with their English proficiency, a program called English in Action. Let me just give you a sense of how that works. Right? People don't have smartphones out there. They're not ubiquitous. They don't, not everyone has them. But they do have, do you remember those Nokia 3210s? Right? So those things that everyone used to play Tetris on or Snake or whatever on earth it was. Everyone has one of those things, right? Java-enabled phone, pretty, sort of early generation. But it's a brilliant phone because what you do with that phone is that you put a $2 SD card into one of these things and it literally comes to life with a whole year's worth of teaching materials. And we teach English language in Bangladesh through song. And it works. So a whole year's worth of English language teaching, you put a $10 speaker into one of these things, and you've got it communicating, you've got it audible to a room full of 30 or 40 people. And that, I think, is a crucial lesson for us, right? We've got to use the technology in country, where people are, and adapt, and rather than sort of saying, this is the way we're doing it in Britain, and therefore this is the way that the world has got to learn. I think our portability is very, very important. Penultimate point is that we also, I think, have to make a really clear argument, all of us, because I was looking at the list, and all of us, I think, come at it from a sort of digital, online, technology angle. We've got to make the argument around distance and personal, right? We used to call this distance learning, and I'm really concerned about the use of that word, because it suggests, the sort of connotation is that it's somehow remote and it's impersonal. Actually, the reason why we consistently get to the top of the National Student Survey every year for teaching quality and student satisfaction is because it's actually really personal. It's really bespoke. It's really tailored. The magic of the OU is partly our technology, but more so, it's our 7,000 associate lecturers, our tutors, up and down the country who help their students through their learning, right? Sometimes, many of us will have gone to universities and have had experiences where it takes you 4 weeks, 5 weeks to have a conversation with your tutor, right? Or to get some work back. Our tutors engage via Skype and email and text and call very, very, very frequently. And that relationship is really, really important. And so I think we've got to hit that head on and make that really clear case, because actually you can deliver great, meaningful, personal relationships. And Simon will hopefully talk about the sort of social web that's been built on FutureLearn to make those personal interactions really, really strong and really, really effective. Now that, I think, is also part of the next iteration for all of our sort of face-to-face universities around what they do in this space. Because I'm very confident, I think you're right, Diane, the business model is still developing, but actually around formal degrees, that is, I think, where the next big iteration will come. And we're already beginning to sort of think about that whole online enabler space. The academic partnerships, the platforms of this world, who will, I'm sure, be sort of coming in and looking at how we create those online degree programs that are personal, that do work, that do have teaching quality at the very heart of them, and do have academic rigor at the heart of them. My final point is this, which is that, and it's to build on something I said a moment ago, which is that, yes, the technology is important, but I really do think we've got to focus on the people here. And there's two groups of people in particular. One is our students, obviously. If they've got technology in every other part of their life, if their banking and their social life and their entertainment and their social media lives are on and using technology, why on earth aren't we fully embracing it in our education? I think that is a challenge that we're all up for and all determined to get right. But crucially, this has to also be about our academics and our people in our institutions who ultimately will be the ones delivering the teaching and learning here. And I completely hear the concern, and we hear it at the OU, let alone any other university, and rightly so, because everyone's doing 17 jobs already. Rajay, is this just job number 18? That is the concern. Our responsibility, our obligation, is to make sure we can tell the story about how this actually can bring you closer to your students, right? We came into education for a reason, which is to transform the lives of our students. And actually technology is an enabler right at the heart of that process to help us do that more effectively and more meaningfully. It's not an addition, it's not another bit of my life. Actually, this is already a part of our lives. And it's one of the crucial methods, one of the crucial means, one of the crucial drivers that will enable us to better support our students in the future. And not only will that be great for those students and those individuals, not only will that be great for our universities, but it'll be brilliant for our sector and remaining at the vanguard of the world. Thanks very much indeed.